Hello everyone, and welcome to this video in my professional education series. This video is about case analysis and reporting in financial accounting at the undergraduate level. However, graduate students prepping for their CFE may find many of the ideas expressed herein helpful or clarifying for their own approach to analyzing and reporting on integrated cases. So this video describes my recommended approach and framework for analyzing and reporting on cases in financial accounting. It doesn't contain any recommendations related to technical knowledge, except that building your technical knowledge is the foundation for being able to respond to cases and for providing valued advice during your professional career. If you would like to be notified of new videos in this series, please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hi again. This is the second module on case analysis and reporting. In this video, I will describe my recommended approach. It expands on and reorganizes an approach proposed by the two authors of the text Canadian Financial Accounting Cases, Camillo Lento and Joanne Ryan. I modified their structure based on my experience developing and teaching the case writing strategies and skills development course in Ryerson's Professional Master's Program in Accounting. This has been a very successful course based on our graduates' success in passing the CFE, which has exceeded the national average by 13 to 20% every year. That course also leverages the recommendations from Jason Fleming's text on CFE case writing and my work in stakeholder analysis. As you will see, understanding the different perspectives of stakeholders who are users of financial information is fundamental to solid case analysis and reporting and delivering PVA. In this framework, I have identified 4 steps that are relevant to understanding your client's situation, the situation you are in, and being able to provide real PVA. In step 1, we need to assess the situation to get a context of what your client is involved in at this time and what their main concern is. In step 2, the objective is to address the individual specific issues, problems, or opportunities using your technical knowledge and generating solutions after considering feasible alternatives for each issue. Moving to step 3, it's about stepping back and taking an holistic perspective by evaluating the big picture, where we develop an overall conclusion about the consolidated impact of the individual issues and factors impacting the main concern. And finally, in step 4, crafting and communicating a set of recommendations that addresses the client's main concern. For example, like getting or keeping critical financing or assessing the adequacy of the client's cash flows. Seems simple, right? And it is. So let's consider what the principal issues are that we should focus on in each of the 4 steps. These issues should guide our thinking and help us maintain an appropriate perspective. When we're assessing the situation, the key focus is to identify the main concern. This is what is critically important or urgent in your client's mind that they have come to you for professional advice about. This is key for 2 reasons. 1, it is the client's focus and even their preoccupation, and addressing it explicitly impacts client satisfaction. Secondly, the main concern is often the factor that aids us in choosing among potential alternative solutions to the smaller issues, problems, and opportunities that you'll identify in step 2. The other important aspect in step 1 is to think about how you can genuinely help the client. So this is a function of your technical knowledge, experience, and judgment. If you can't help for some reason, for example, it's beyond the scope of your competence, you should at least be prepared to refer the client to another professional who can. Now, we'll go into the analysis of issues in more depth subsequently. But here's the key point. You need to stay focused on those individual issues that impact the client's main concern And you need to use good management decision science, starting with identifying possible alternative solutions and being prepared to recommend to the client what specific action to take. This is what they are paying for, and if you fail to do this, the client will be as disappointed as you would be if you went to see a medical doctor who did some tests on you and determined that you had COVID-19, but didn't specifically tell you what to do about it. Would you like to be left on your own in this situation? I think not. Why? Because you're likely not a medical professional and you went to one to get their professional advice. Well, that's exactly what your client wants from you. In step 3, this is about consolidating and assessing the overall impact on the client's main concern of the issues that you analyzed in step 2. Have you resolved the main concern, or have you contributed to it sufficiently that the client is likely to value your advice? Or have you possibly left them hanging without an actionable solution, in which case they will be reluctant to pay your invoice? If you have been successful in devising recommendations that will help, then you will need to effectively communicate your recommendations, reasons, and impact or benefits or costs in a concise, organized, and coherent manner, suitably supported, such that they will be inclined or even compelled to act on your advice. Now, do you notice any common theme in this illustration? Hopefully you did. As you can see, everything hinges on the client's main concern. So be sure that you both identify it and keep it in mind when you're analyzing each issue. In the graduate program, students learn how to perform case analysis and reporting for comprehensive, integrated, or multi-subject cases. In our intermediate accounting course, our cases are focused on financial accounting and reporting issues. So the deeper insights into the MacMaster modified Lento and Ryan case analysis and reporting framework are focused primarily on providing PVA in financial accounting and reporting. So in this situation, we are going to proceed through a series of steps that help you to understand how you can be useful in this context of providing advice related to financial accounting and reporting. The first step is to clearly understand your role or your perspective. So you need to insert yourself into this case. If the case or situation doesn't really matter to you, your response will be ho-hum or blasé. So think about why it's important to you to engage. In the second step, this is all about identifying who the users are, what their needs and objectives are. So this is really something you can refresh in your mind by studying the conceptual framework. So who are the stakeholders? Why are they trying, what are they trying to achieve, and what's important to them? How do they think? This we will cover in some stakeholder analysis later in the course. And most importantly, what is their main concern? Remember, you have to figure this out. Otherwise, you really don't know how to help the client and provide PVA. And so that is really comes back to the issue of understanding how you can be useful in this particular case. So the next thing to consider, the third step or the third component of step 1, is to identify who are the preparers of the financial information that you're going to be analyzing. Here we might want to reflect on their objectives and whether they have any biases, and also what our perception is of the consequence of these biases, their skill in preparing information, and their objectives on the quality of the information you're going to be analyzing. The next step is to identify what the financial reporting constraints are. And there are many choices here. So they might include IFRS, ASPE, something I call ODBA, which stands for an other disclosed basis of accounting, and also limitations in contracts, such as a loan agreement. These will influence your identification of some of the alternatives available when it comes time for analysis. And obviously, these will influence your accounting recommendations as well. The fifth component or consideration is to review the business environment and conditions. So these are external conditions that will alert us to potential problems and opportunities, as well as the temporal feasibility of our possible recommendations. For example, what is the current state of capital markets? If the client needs to raise financing, do the markets have capital available, and are they interested in providing financing? Finally, the sixth consideration here is to understand the entity's business. So this is an internal consideration in contrast to step 1.5. It's the other side of the coin. In this step, we're going to want to do a brief analysis of the business entity's financial position, recent performance, any financial risks that it is exposed to. Otherwise, how can you be confident that any advice you provide is contextually relevant to the client at this time? So, for example, if you suggest that increasing the entity's term debt is the appropriate action when they're already over-levered and violating the debt covenants, this is a sure way to destroy the client's perception of your credibility. So remember, the objective of financial reporting is to provide quality information and advice that is useful to users within the confines of your professional competence. In step 2, when we're analyzing the individual issues, the first element here is to identify and describe what those issues are. Now, in financial accounting and reporting, this involves identifying the related accounting issue, and those issues come from a set of 4 possibilities, which includes recognition, measurement, presentation, and disclosure. And of course, the particular accounting issue might deal with more than one of these issues at a time. In the second consideration, it's important to prioritize or rank these issues by some degree of importance. Now, in the cases we analyze in intermediate accounting, you're really expected to analyze all issues. But the reason I incorporated this consideration at this time is as your case analysis and reporting evolves and you start dealing with integrated cases, often what happens is there's not enough time available to deal with all issues. And so you need to deal with the most important issues first so that you can provide the greatest benefit to the client in the limited time that's available. In financial accounting and reporting cases, I typically recommend that we rank order the issues on the basis of their anticipated material impact on, guess what, the client's main concern. So we now are going to go through a series of 5 steps as we analyze each particular issue. The first element is to determine, for the issue identified, what the technical requirements are to address the issue. Next, we want to address what the relevant alternatives are. So, for example, these may be constrained by the choices available under GAAP. Why is this important? Well, best management practice for any decision starts with A, preventing us from jumping to conclusions. B, it avoids wasting time on unnecessary work, which is a demonstration of an enabling competency, time management. And also consider the two-handed approach, particularly if you must address different user perspectives that might conflict, such as involving the principal-agent relationship between shareholders and management. So after we've identified the relevant alternatives for each accounting issue, the next step is to analyze each alternative appropriately. Here, it's important to balance both qualitative and quantitative analysis. And it's important to be specific to the case facts. Now, there's no need to regurgitate case facts, and you certainly shouldn't be making any assumptions. Assumptions tend to change the nature of the case. In the sixth consideration, what's critical here is to conclude as a result of your analysis. In other words, come to a final assessment. And that conclusion needs to be consistent with your analysis of the various alternatives. So for example, you might have analyzed 3 possible alternatives, and the conclusion is to pick one which is in some sense best based on a particular criteria that you felt was relevant to the client's main concern. Lastly, we need to consider making a recommendation. This is where professional value added comes from. In other words, tell your client specifically what to do. This is what they want to hear, and this is what they're willing to pay for, if they consider the advice to be valuable. Also, in real life, this is tentative until you complete step 3 in this case analysis framework. So remember, considering alternatives is a basic tenet of decision making. One use of your technical knowledge is to help you identify alternatives for analysis. For example, recognition of revenue and other elements, measurement or valuation. So avoid jumping to the first possible idea or solution that you think of without considering alternatives. Also remember, if you don't conclude, then what has your analysis been for? It is incomplete. And recommendations or professional value added is what your client wants and what they need from you, because they don't have your knowledge. This is what they may be willing to pay you for if they consider your advice to be valuable. How do you know if it's valuable? Well, put yourself in their shoes. Would you pay for it? Step 3 is about stepping away from all the nitty-gritty details to look at the bigger picture, like rising above the trees to view the complete forest. In this step, your task is to consider the whole, particularly with respect to the client's main concern. You must synthesize or aggregate the results of your detailed analysis. In fact, the word synthesize is the opposite of analyze, which involves breaking things down into components. So the way to do this is firstly to consolidate the impacts of your recommendations from step 2.7 and to consider their collective effect on some overarching objective of the key users, that is, their main concern. This is usually accomplished with the help of a fresh exhibit in which you bring the impacts of all individual issues together. Next, develop a final or overall conclusion. For example, with all recommended accounting changes to bring your financial statements into compliance with ASPE, the working capital covenant of your loan is violated. Finally, conduct a quality check on your own work. Review its accuracy, propriety, and internal consistency. In an exam situation, you will likely skip this step in the interest of time. In group work, this is where collaboration helps, with group members checking one another's analyses and arguments. And in real-life professional engagements, this typically involves review by another professional, often more senior. So remember, another way to think of this step is that you are consolidating all of your analyses as answers to the what question, or what is going on here, and drawing a big picture conclusion is the answer to the question, so what? We will answer the next question in step 4. In step 4, we are continuing the what, so what line of questioning to ultimately answer the question, now what? Remember, your primary goal is to inspire your client to take action that is expected to help them improve their business's performance, condition, valuation, etc., whatever their main concern is. When reflecting on the real value that you have added, you know at this point what you've created. So ask yourself, is this excellent advice that I'd be willing and happy to pay for? If it is not, and you send your results to your client, your work will be perceived as a waste of time and money, and you will lose credibility. In that case, Go back and figure out how and where you can add value that your client will be delighted to pay for. On the other hand, if you believe you have generated PVA for the client, then the remaining task is to communicate it persuasively. Effective communication will help you achieve the secondary goal of favorably influencing the client's perceptions of you and your advice. And getting this right influences achievement of the primary goal, which is why how you communicate is important. Achieving both these goals can be aided by two communication attributes, substance and form, or what you say and how you say it. Substance pertains to the importance or the meaningfulness of your content to the client. So be sure to focus on the client's expressed or implied wants, i.e. their main concern, and provide your professional opinion that specifically addresses it. I will explain how with an example using the next slide. The form or format of your presentation can be effective if it is highly organized or structured, concise, focused, and coherent. And you can construct it in this way partly because of all the behind-the-scenes work, analysis, and professional reflection you have done. So it's important, particularly in a real-life engagement, not to ruin the potential to achieve your two goals by writing carelessly. I'll provide some guidance for how to do this using a subsequent slide. In dealing with the substance of your communication to the client, remember there is your opinion of your PVA, and then there is their perception of your PVA. It is their perception of your PVA that matters if you want them to take action. Therefore, you must create a strongly favorable impression of yourself or the firm you represent and the value of your advice from the client's perspective. The best way I know of to do that is to focus on the client's expressed or implied wants, i.e. their main concern, and provide your professional opinion that concisely and clearly communicates three things. First, your overall conclusion related to the main concern. For example, in a client situation where you have been asked to assess their ability to retain existing debt financing, you might report, in my opinion, adjusting your financial statements to appropriately reflect the application of relevant accounting standards results in your company's financial position being in violation of your debt covenants. This conclusion is a statement of opinion based on a combination of your technical knowledge and your analysis of the facts in this specific situation. That explicitly answers the what question. The next point is to communicate your assessment of the impact or implications or consequences. For example, you might add, the lender has the contractual right to demand repayment of your entire loan within 30 days of becoming aware of this situation. If they do so, your available cash resources would be adversely impacted, preventing your company from pursuing important business objectives, unless you can avert this action or find substitute financing. This addresses the so what question, because your communication clearly draws attention to the critical importance of your analysis, since the client's business will be materially affected without taking appropriate action. Actions that your technical knowledge, professional judgment, and experience qualify you to recommend to help them. Therefore, next, you should consider insightful recommendations for action that benefit the main concern. In other words, what specifically are you encouraging the client to do to solve the problem or take advantage of an opportunity? Continuing with the example, you might suggest, take these three specific actions that will bring your debt covenants into compliance within the next 60 days. Then, communicate with the lender to inform them of your business entity's current condition, your plans to comply with all covenants, and request their patience and cooperation to sustain an ongoing relationship for both parties' benefit. You could even offer to accompany them to explain to the lender the viability of your client's plan. And this addresses the now what question in a way that your client ought to be able to perceive your PVA clearly. Apart from the occasional hand-holding type of assistance I described in my example, and in addition to client meetings where we can explain our conclusions, implications, and recommendations, our primary means of communication is through written reports. These form an important and permanent reference for your client to rely on, and so they need to be constructed with professional care. This is why I describe this instruction as case analysis and reporting. Respecting all the behind-the-scenes work, analysis, and professional reflection that you have done, you can't just dump all this information into your client's lap because many clients will not be able to interpret it or to connect the elements. Doing so, or writing carelessly, would undoubtedly detract from your credibility and thereby possibly frustrate your primary goal of providing PVA by compelling the client to action. So here are some tips and caveats on how to develop a professional report in a coherent and understandable format. First, to borrow a phrase from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I like to begin with the end in mind. What does this mean? Well, with all of my emphasis throughout this video on your client's main concern, your advice on this matter is what they urgently want to know. So tell them immediately. Well, almost. The way I do this in real-life professional engagements is in an executive summary. The advantage of this is obviously that it cuts to the chase, saves the reader a significant amount of time by allowing them to only read supporting analysis and arguments if they're interested. It gets everyone on the same page quickly and segues into a discussion of the justification and supporting arguments. You may include one highlights exhibit in the executive summary that illustrates the points you are making about the client's main concern. But the caveat is, for most people, you should not do this on the CFE. The reason is that the marking guides for CPA Common Final exams do not include explicit provision for marks for this component of communication, and therefore it is considered a waste of precious time. I propose that the exceptions to this exception are: A, if those marking guidelines are eventually changed by CPA Canada to reflect the importance of this element of professional communication, then do it, but you'll be told in advance. And B, if you can quickly assemble the executive summary by becoming extremely proficient at implementing my other tips, you can probably write one in about 1 minute. The second point is related to organizing a structure for your report that flows logically. While you can begin with the end in mind and place the executive summary right at the beginning of your report as suggested, an alternative is that you can place it after the table of contents or after what's called the terms of reference. The terms of reference is typically included in a professional report, and it describes what you were asked to do. This conveys to the client how well you understood your task or assignment and sets the stage for you to tell them what they're anxious to learn by highlighting in the executive summary your conclusions and recommendations that respond directly to the terms of reference. Depending on how you compose the supporting section, these conclusions and recommendations can often be copy-pasted to save time right into the executive summary. Next, you should prepare an assessment or a summary of the assessment of the situation as it bears on the main concern, highlighting anything unique, as this helps with your credibility because it comforts the client to know that you actually understood their perspective and their objectives. And lastly, you can provide details of analyses, arguments, and complex exhibits in supporting sections of your report or in appendices. In a real-life professional engagement, I like to cross-reference all points in my executive summary to supporting analyses in various sections and exhibits. The third point here is to learn to leverage the power and time-saving features of your application software, like Word and Excel, to support quick and professional-looking reports with pre-formatted styles for headings and subheadings, as well as creating tables of contents and embedded links for cross-referencing. I'll have more to share on this and the PACER structure for exhibits in another video. And please be sure to use automatic spell check and grammar checking when you write so as not to detract from your professional style. This is especially important if writing in a language you may not be completely familiar with. Here's a list of credits for images that I used in this presentation section. In this presentation section and video, I have provided both the breadth and depth of a framework for case analysis and reporting for accounting professionals. In the next section, I will identify and provide insights into 5 key case writing skills that are essential to passing professional CPA exams and for case analysis and reporting in financial management and accounting. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the third video module on this subject, 5 key case writing strategies and skills.